Hi again, friends. Hope you all are doing well. If you guys would do me a favor and take a second and number your pages, it would just be helpful for me as I plan some things. I might refer back to the pages. Maybe I won't, but just in case, if you guys could take a second now to number them, that'd be awesome. So just at the bottom, number your pages now as I'm talking. I feel like I should be talking about something, but nothing's going on right now. Except the janitors are outside and I keep thinking they're gonna come in the middle of me recording again. Okay, you should be good. Okay, so I talked the other day about moving water up a plant, but that's not the only thing that's moving through a plant. There are other things as well. But there are two types of tissue in a plant. If you look at plant tissue under a microscope, there are two distinct sections, xylem and phloem. And the xylem transports water and minerals. Phloem is going to transport the food. And so they always use these terms interchangeably, like the glucose, it's the food. It's the sugars, because it's not always glucose. It's the organic molecules. So any of those things are the same thing. You just have probably noticed already that they use them interchangeably. But remember, organic molecules are anything with carbon, so those are key macromolecules. Water is going to move up the plant by something called the cohesion tension theory. And that explains transpiration due to cohesion and adhesion. So hopefully you remember that we talked about them in biochemistry, the biochemistry unit. So not just remembering them from basic biology, but from our biochemistry that we did in this class. I feel so ADD right now because I can hear the janitors outside. And I'm like, are you coming in or are you not? Okay, so the main force driving water from roots to leaves is transpiration. They love to test about that. And I told you guys the other day it's evaporation, but all of this kind of ties together. Like the cohesion tension theory explains transpiration. How is water able to move up the plant and leave? And it's not just because it's evaporating and turning into a gas that rises. So how is this happening? So when water molecules leave due to transpiration, subsequent water molecules are going to be pulled into their place because of cohesion. And that's going to create tension pulling water molecules upward. Not only that, but the water sticking to the sides of the plant and not being pulled down because they're adhering to the sides of the walls. So if this is like our plant and here are water molecules, very scientific picture, transpiration is happening. These molecules are evaporating from the plant up here. And because water is attracted, the second this water molecule leaves, this one's attracted to it, so it's going to go with, pulling all these guys, domino effect, upwards. Not only that, but they're not going to fall because they're also attracted to the sides, adhesion. So they're sticking to the sides, they're sticking to each other, and they're moving up. Now there is another factor to this, root pressure. How do we get it into the root in the first place? Why does water move into the roots? And that all goes back to the fact that you have a lot of solutes in the roots. And you already know that water likes to go to where there's solutes. I feel like this is kind of a separate part because it's talking about in total. When you consider the pressure, when you consider the solutes, when you consider all of those things, water moves from high water potential to low, if you guys remember. So sometimes they'll give you a picture of a plant and they'll say, where would you assume the lowest water potential is? Where's the highest? So in this picture, the key part is high water potential down here, low water potential up here. What's interesting is that 90% of the water that gets into a plant is actually lost through transpiration. So plants need so much water, but a lot of it is actually distributed. Okay, I told you guys that stomata are for gas exchange. Remember, these are the primary things that are going to be exchanged. We talked about how in aquatic plants, water passes directly through loose cells in the tissue. Now we're going to talk about why stomata open and close. So what happens is whenever the plant detects low levels of CO2, it's going to want to open the stomata to get CO2 in. So you can kind of see these guard cells we talked about very briefly the other day. That's these guys, this whole thing. So when the plant needs CO2, opens up. When it's good, closes up. But you do not have to know how, or why, rather. So the first thing that happens is when low levels are detected, there's hydrogen ions that move out of the guard cells, and that sets up a sort of electrochemical gradient. When that happens, potassium ions move down that gradient into the guard cells. And then water is going to follow that, follow the potassium. And that increases the turgor pressure in the cells against the cell walls, making them tight and open. So going step by step, when there's low levels of CO2, hydrogen ions are going to leave. Basically what happens is there are just these channels in the pumps in the membrane of those cells. And so they're going to move those hydrogens out. And so they're going to pump these hydrogens out of here. And then because that sets up an electrochemical gradient, those potassium ions are going to want to go in. And then I always think of it as water will go wherever there's more solutes. And well, our solutes are going in here. Potassium is a solute. So because that's going in, your water is going to follow. So just think of your potassium and your water as best friends. In all the pictures we do for this and everything, water, potassium, best friends. Wherever one goes, the other's going to go. And it's kind of like a balloon. So the second you pour water into this balloon, those guard cells plump up. And then that opens that hole. So I've had students get confused because they think, well, if they plump up, that means they're going to take up more space and the hole's closed. They have this shape. So if they plump up, they just naturally go to this shape, opening the hole. Closing is going to be the exact opposite. They do introduce this hormone, though, called abscisic acid. And that is produced in response to dehydration. So if the plant's dehydrated, you want to close that hole. You don't want to lose any water. It can also happen though if CO2 levels are high. Stop the process, close off the CO2. And I hate that it says or lack of water. Well, I mean, it could be, I guess that does make sense that it's saying or lack of water, but I thought it was just going to say low trigger pressure because that's going to happen no matter what. So these cells right here, have low trigger pressure. These have high trigger pressure. So this is going to be the opposite. So abscisic acid will cause movement of potassium out of the cell. And water follows. They're best friends. So you can draw that if you want. You don't have to, but abscisic acid in the cell causes potassium to move out, water to move out. Alright, and then we talked yesterday a little bit about transpiration. And we talked about how it's really good for a plant because of cooling and movement of water up the plant. But if we have too much, that's going to be bad because you're not going to have that trigger pressure throughout the whole plant and against the cell walls. So then it starts to wilt. So if transpiration is just basically the evaporation through the stomata, there are three basic things that affects that. Light. So we're going to have increased transpiration with more light. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I really hope I haven't been doing this the whole time. I'll have to check back on this. I've just been looking at my paper. I wasn't looking at the video. Oh my gosh. If I have to do this again. Increased temperature, increased evaporation, makes sense. And then, interestingly enough, wind. So if you think of all those water molecules leaving that leaf and the wind's blowing them away, it kind of makes the process just happen faster.